We have merchandise for sale. Go to our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, click on the link to our store, and you can see the amazing t-shirts, stickers, and posters we have for sale. Our excellent friend Amy Patnovic made the design, and we coded all of our social issues from our past episodes with all of the movies we've discussed. But there's a secret to the design. Each image represents a movie, and you have to guess which one it is. We think it's going to be a really fun puzzle design for you to solve, and we hope you'll order lots of t-shirts and share it with your friends. Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari.
And I'm Stacy Moore.
Stacy, what movie are we going to overanalyze this week?
This week we're overanalyzing Hostels. And that's hostels like enemies, not backpackers resorts. After building a military career on exterminating indigenous Americans, Captain Joseph Blocker, played by Christian Bale, reluctantly agrees to escort his nemesis, the dying Cheyenne war chief Yellow Hawk, and his family back to their tribal land, but their encounters along the way will blur the lines between ally and enemy. I know I've apologized a couple times to Nicole, but I don't mind reiterating that I'm sorry you had to experience the super violent scenes in this movie, but I really appreciate it, as this was a movie I was really excited to do. How did you fare with those?
I thank you. I do appreciate the apology. I do think I am owed it because this movie was really violent.
It was really, really harsh. Yeah.
It was, yeah. So as you all know, spoiler alerts will abound. But in like the first 5 minutes, a baby gets shot, and I was like, oh no.
She's not kidding. Literally, a baby gets shot, and it's really, it's not graphic as for the baby, but we do watch like two little like young girls get shot in the back. It's really tough to watch towards the beginning, even for me. And so I could only imagine like what Nicole was sort of, how she was handling that at the time.
Yes, so it was traumatizing, but I would say, like, when you have the American West to film, you're going to have to be pretty bad at your job to screw it up. But it was just a beautiful movie. It was so beautifully shot.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. And I really appreciated that. And then, in our downsizing episode, I made the point that I'm like, I'm not seeing any good editing. Where's the good editing? And this movie had some like really beautiful dissolves, a fade to black, a fade to white. And I was like, yes, editing. So I got really excited about editing. So that was good. What did you think?
Well, the cinematography was great. It had those gorgeous, scenes of the prairies and where most of the frame is sky, and there's like just thunder clouds. That was all great. I went back and listened to the score today. It's by it's by Max Richter, whom I'm a huge fan of.
What else has he done?
A movie called Disconnect. Has a actually there. Well, the score from Disconnect features an arrival in a scene that as I recall, you actually felt was kind of like a little bit much. But yeah, he did that score. In Hostels, it's a very like subtle but intense score that like really presses the narrative along. Like it adds to it without being a Band-Aid.
I loved it.
So anyway, yeah,
I'm totally with you. I'd be remiss in I agree 100%. I loved the score, and it was emotional, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like it was forcing.
It was
emotion
heavy-handed
out of me. Yeah, so it didn't
like it didn't have to cover up for the performances because the performances did all the work.
Right. It just enhanced the mood. I still think, that great quote that Jen made when we did The Circle, where she was like, if you have to tell the story with the score, you're doing a bad job filmmaking.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and this was not the case. And it was beautiful. I really love the score. I'm glad you said that. I'm going to go back and listen to it too.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. But yeah, we had a great cast, right? We had Christian Bale, Rosamund Pike, whom I love. She always does really interesting projects. And they both, the camera would just sit on the two of them for like, ages. And they just made it so, like the experiences that they were going through and projecting were just impossible, not to connect with, right? Like what Rosamund Pike's character, Rosalie Quaid, goes through. We see her go through a really traumatic, violent experience. She watches her whole family get, destroyed, annihilated by Comanche warriors, I guess. And but then we just kind of watch her grieve for like 17 minutes or something, and it's riveting watching her just, dealing with the Captain Joseph Blocker's detail, with Yellow Hawk and his family happen upon her like after everything's gone down, and they just find her just kind of like rocking herself basically amongst her late children, and just watching her dealing with the soldiers like lady, we got to bury your kids, but they never rush her. They're so considerate and like empathetic towards her, especially Blocker, like really goes above and beyond, like trying to, it was just watching Blocker be this really considerate, empathetic guy added a level of it just added layers to his character after we had watched his character development, right, as a really just terrible war criminal, essentially.
Yes.
Like, so we had that to deal with, and Christian Bale just like pulls it off. He's just amazing in this.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was. And then, so I spent like, I don't know, a half an hour of this movie or something. So everybody in this movie has, all the men in the movie have some kind of facial hair thing happening.
Right.
And so his like second banana, I remember his first name is Tommy. What's his last name? Metz? Is it Metz?
I think it's Metz. I think it's Sergeant Metz. Yeah.
Okay. So he has like this huge, full, bushy beard. And I'm just like watching this guy and I'm like, I know this actor. I know him. And I just like, and it's just bearing down on me. And then finally I'm like, oh no, it's Rory Cochrane. It's the guy who says the most famous line ever from Empire Records, where they ask him, "What's with you today?" And he goes, "What's with today?" And I'm just sitting there like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've seen this dude at all in the intervening years, like since the 90s. I don't know what he's done.
He went dark. His career went dark for sure.
But he was
I still
so
can't
good.
believe it, even after you told me. He was amazing.
Yeah.
He was amazing. Yeah. He gets a couple of monologues, right? He's Blocker's number 2, as Nicole mentioned. He's suffers from depression, and we get the sense that there's a lot of like PTSD there as well, that all the war crimes that he's committed since he joined the military at 14 has been weighing on him, right? Mm-hmm. And Blocker is constantly having to like talk him off the ledge and say stay with me just a little longer. But he gets to. It's not just gratuitous sort of like give me an Oscar monologues. He really is pushing the story forward and sort of giving us an idea of what all these soldiers and also the Cheyenne warriors, right, have been dealing with as in their various capacities as soldiers and warriors, having to commit acts of violence is actually something that connects them all, right? Anyway,
right.
Yeah, I loved his performance. So good. Yeah,
him and Ben Foster too.
Oh, yes.
Not in it for much, but also just amazing.
Yeah, they just shred and move the narrative along with like everything they do. Really good stuff. And then, of course, right, we have we have our, First Nations cast, which is kind of the whole point of this movie, right? So we've got Adam Beach, who is Yellow Hawk's son, was the star of Smoke Signals several, maybe, 20 years back or so, and has since made a career of portraying the nice First Nations guy in every movie since. I've joked before that I reckon there's a lot of Native American actors who are just waiting for Adam Beach to like either retire or just get hit by a car or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he takes all the roles. And then, of course, Wes Studi as Yellow Hawk himself, who has always himself conversely made a career as always being the bad Injun who loves killing white folks, and is kind of a foil for the good Injun, who, throughout the 90s and millennium would have to take out Wes Studi to help the protagonists. So putting him in this role as Captain Blocker's arch nemesis, who they've been fighting against, right, almost their entire lives and have killed each other's friends and whatnot, to put him in this role and then make them reconcile over the course of the film is pretty rewarding to watch.
Yeah, I think one of the things about the movie that really worked well was, that relationship between Blocker and Yellow Hawk really coming to like understand and respect each other happens very organically. Like it never feels forced or like someone had a quick change of mind that was unearned. You sort of see piece by piece. And the movie, so one of the things is interesting about the movie is like there's a very kind of, to me, clear pattern of the violence in that, opening set piece is Comanche attack on the Quaid family. Immediately following that scene are Blocker and his soldiers torturing an Indian man while his family is watching and being upset. And then, you pass to another, sort of Comanche attack. And then you have, the the Irish fur traders attack. So there's always sort of like, there's a metered sort of counterbalance of violence along the way. But there's a couple things that you just don't see. And what you don't see, one of the big scenes is, so after the Comanches attack their party, as they're moving, they're sort of like a wagon train along the way. The Yellow Hawk and his family are in chains. They ask to be released. They like badass fight off some Comanches while they're still in chains.
Right. Like Yellow Hawk's son chokes out a guy with his shackles.
Yeah. And so they're like, so they fight alongside, and Blocker and his team, and they sort of earn the right to be without chains. And then they get up the next morning and they move out, and then they see the rest of the Comanche party as dead. And that, and in the middle of the night, Yellowtail and his son, I don't know why I keep saying Yellowtail, Yellow Hawk and his son have like snuck off and did what needed to be done, which I thought was really interesting. You never see an Indian on Indian fight in this movie. You do. But you see them all together. But that point of the Cheyenne taking on the Comanches, like that happens
like out of our purview.
Right. Yeah. So you're always told how violent a past Yellow Hawk has, but you don't see it.
Yeah, it was that scene is pretty key, right? Because that's where, and as you noted, the reconciliation doesn't feel forced. I was very skeptical that the movie would pull it off, but that scene pretty much does it in a way. Like there are other dynamics along the way that you see those changes, but that scene of them fighting together against the Comanche is pretty much where Blocker has his sort of recalibration, right? Where he sees his mortal enemy fighting alongside him against another Native American, which in his mind they were all the same, right? And and you see on Christian Bale's face that he is, in this one moment, like resorting, like the blocks in his head are all, kind of stacking themselves in this new sort of worldview that he is, he's having trouble processing it, but he's doing it. And now because, he's a warrior, Yellowhawk's a warrior. They've always been on, they always fought against each other, but now just that they're fighting with each other, like, as far as Blocker sees the world, that makes them brothers, essentially.
Right. He finally sees them as the soldier that he is. Because through a lot of the movie, like his big defense about how all the, atrocities and things that he's done along the way is like, I was following orders, right? So, if I was ordered to do it, it's fine. It's if you do it without orders, then suddenly that's morally wrong. And he needs to progress through the movie to come through the realization that orders or no orders, it doesn't really make a difference. But since that is sort of internally his moral cover, like he starts to see that this was a war, there was an opposing side, that opposing side had soldiers and orders the same as he did.
Exactly.
And different, change the head, like he's now under presidential orders to treat this guy with dignity and humanity and to take him back to his homeland, and that once the orders change, it doesn't make a difference, like that everybody's a soldier and they were all fighting in a war, and what side you were on is not hugely relevant.
It's simultaneously not personal and completely personal. Right. So he's like, as a soldier, he's like, it's just a job. I just do that. But we all know that's not true, because clearly he would take a bullet for anybody he's ever fought with. And I know I'm always the military apologist on this podcast, and I'm comfortable with that. I'm totally comfortable with that.
Good.
I know it's complicated. But I would like to propose that while the military is always, at least in the States, has always had its issues, obviously there's room for improvement in a lot of ways. On racial equality, they've always been a few steps ahead of the rest of society, and that's because we all bleed the same color, right? And they explore that. They certainly explore that with Blocker's corporal majors. That he's a black corporal that is and Blocker relies on this guy, and they are. You get the sense that they are, brothers in the military sense. And as far as Blocker is concerned, this guy is like, he would do anything for Majors, and Majors would do anything for him. And they have a nice moment where, Majors gets injured and he has to, bow out of the mission, and they have to say goodbye, probably for the last time, because Blocker is retiring, and the two of them are just like crying, like it's so sweet. These two guys, like oh, it's we spent a lifetime like killing civilians together. Yeah, I'm gonna miss you, man. But he does say, Blocker says, like, I would have died 20 times if you hadn't been on my flank. Like, I owe you my life 20 times over, and I would I would do anything for you. And at that time, I mean, obviously this is all fictional, but that is true to a certain extent, that soldiers will look past a lot of things because they know someone will be there on their flank, and they would take a bullet for each other regardless of anything else. And so that extends to Yellowhawk, right? In a way that just really surprises Blocker.
I thought, again, I understood why they put a black character in there and what it was trying to say. And it could have felt, again, heavy-handed and forced, but I actually thought I get probably because of the performances, just very sort of natural of saying how you came to America, what makes you an American, and who gets to be here is a complicated situation. And Blocker just sort of sees what's in front of his face, you know, like he's like, this is a soldier. I'm a soldier. We can be on the same side, and that's okay. But this is an enemy, and they're an enemy, so I can't ever change my mind. You know, he has he does learn to change his mind, but the sort of stark contrast between having a black soldier and, you know, having a American Indian or soldier, it added that sort of nuances to, like, it's more complicated than just color or racism.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's well put.
Yeah, so it sort of like leads me into, you know, I want us to give our sort of like out loud editorial,
right?
Yeah, our disclaimer and our sort of editorial policy. So we've been asked more than once to cover a movie that featured American Indians or First Nations people, however, you know, you feel we should be saying it, please tell us. But it's not an issue. Yeah, it's not an issue that I personally know much about or have studied much. And we don't have anyone that we know that we could call upon as a co-host. And since we believe so strongly in own voices and in, you know, really deep knowledge of something before we tackle it, you know, we've avoided it. But this one was different. Do you want to say why, Stacy?
Yes, I did propose this one because while I absolutely agree with Nicole and everything she just said, it goes for me as well. I do feel pretty well versed in Westerns and portrayals of First Nations characters in Westerns. So I felt like, at least from that point of view, once I heard that Hostiles was a critique of those portrayals, you know, I felt like, okay, I think this I feel like I can do. I can't speak for anyone from any First Nation, but I can speak about the portrayals in Westerns from the 20th century and onward. So that's why I was pretty excited to do this one. Shall I give my little John Ford spiel?
Please.
Excellent,
walk us through like how you think this movie did, and give us some historical context.
Absolutely. So I saw a lot of references. I had a feeling just from the reference to Cheyenne, and which I'll explain in a second. But I had a feeling there would be a lot of John Ford references in this, and they're not too overt, but they certainly are. Like, you can tell that whoever wrote and directed this, and I feel like I should know who that is, but they are, you know, they've seen a lot of John Ford movies, from the, you know, the use of thunderstorms to all the Irish characters.
There were a lot of Irish people in this movie.
There were a lot of mix in this movie. And
so, like, why? Like, tell me what that has to do with Westerns, because I really didn't follow that.
Absolutely nothing. John Ford was Irish American, and he just was really into his sort of Irish heritage, and so he just put a lot of Irish guys.
That's hilarious. I had that flew. I noticed there were a lot of Irish people. It totally flew over my head. Oh, that's really funny. Okay, keep going.
That's all there is. And so his earliest, he had a pretty evident trajectory, right, from his earliest films like Stagecoach, which was actually one of the first big movies that John Wayne was in, where it's literally just a stagecoach full of white folks running away from Injun. Like, they're just like, oh no, the Injun are coming, and they're just trying to escape the. And the Native Americans are depicted as like this just sort of evil force of nature. Like, they don't even have faces. Like, they're just guys on horses shooting arrows at these people. So that's the whole plot, is like, who gets away? Will they get away? And then, you know, moving onward through his cavalry trilogy, which was, you know, Fort Apache, She Wore the Yellow Ribbon, and Rio Grande, slightly more the Native Americans get like a little more character, but not much. There's still just sort of the adversaries that need to be stopped. But then we get to the searchers, which is, well, it is certainly problematic, and there are some scenes that make me want to like just throw my TV across the room. It is one of the greatest films ever made, and definitely one of the greatest westerns ever made. And it gets, there's an added level of complexity as far as, you know, John Wayne's character is no longer just a great guy in a white hat fighting Indians. You see that he is actually quite bitter and racist and has some growing to do. And he does grow a bit by the end of the film, going from like they're searching for this little girl who was abducted by a tribe. And he goes from wanting to save her from the evil Indians to realizing that she has sort of entered their culture, to wanting to kill her because she had the nerve to stop, as he sees it, stop being white.
Wow.
And then comes 360 back around to accepting her for who she is and the experiences she's been through. Anyway, it's beautiful in a lot of ways and ugly in a lot of ways, but that's about his midpoint. To by the end of John Ford's career, he does Cheyenne Autumn, which is essentially, and it's not very good, but it is essentially an apology for his an entire career of depicting Native Americans as just sort of evil, just kind of ravenous animals. And I think that the fact that Yellow Hawk and his son and their family are Cheyenne, I think is no mistake. That is absolutely no mistake.
Yeah. So to me, I think I'm nowhere near this expertise that you have, Stacy. And I was.
Oh, go on.
No, really, I'm not on Westerns. I mean, but I do feel like I have to see The Searchers now, and I really don't want to because I can't stand John Wayne. So there was like a couple things I was kind of looking out for. I did do some homework about this issue in preparation for the movie, and so I mean, in this sort of like pantheon of Westerns and moving the ball forward, like first and foremost, Wes Studi, Adam Beach are themselves American Indians, right? So that's already like a big deal because so many times we both read this article, which I'll post in the show links, that like apparently actually all the extras in all these Westerns all along were American Indians. Like that was actually
blew my mind.
Yeah. So, but the leads almost never were. They were, somebody with a lot of bronzer on.
Right.
Or I think in one instance, Ricardo Montalban, like somebody who just was dark-skinned, but this is from a different culture.
Sure.
Yeah. So that was really cool. So I think, though, on the demerit side, one of the things that kind of bothered me was, along with you sort of had two portrayals of American Indians, right? Like either the like savage Injun or the wise, in touch with nature, super spiritual
right
Indian. And I thought that there was just a lot of shots of Wes Studi like gazing off into space and being like wise and giving old man wisdom to Christian Bale. That kind
He's
of
so good at it, though. He's so good at gazing into space.
He has one of those faces that
he just looks pensive, right?
Well, and he has that, like lined, interesting, like I've been through some stuff faces.
Oh, sure.
Which is amazing. So I was a little bit, I didn't love that aspect, but then at the same time I was like, am I being overly harsh? Because, like, you could just see this as the old man giving the young man, like, wisdom trope as well, which actually has nothing to do with color.
Right.
Right. But I think the biggest thing for me that I loved so much about this movie was pretty much whenever the Cheyenne are talking, they are talking in their own language. And I am not a Western expert, but I can't think of a movie when I have, like, prolongedly heard any, Indian language like spoken, and just to hear how it sounds was amazing for me. And I just absolutely loved every moment where I got to hear that language on screen. And to me, that was just so, it wasn't like they said one word, switched to English, and they're like, we're done speaking Cheyenne now. Like, I thought
right.
that was just such an amazing part of this movie.
And Captain Blocker even speaks it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they take it that step further where they are the main character, and these folks are actually conversing in Cheyenne at several points.
Right. And I mean, okay, so I'll give the biggest disclaimer at all. We all know how much I hate long, boring movies. So I never actually saw Dances with Wolves. So I felt like that was like the first big like step forward to like portraying, although of course he still has to end up with a white woman. But
okay.
does he speak? Does he speak their language in the movie?
Oh gosh, I haven't seen it since I was like 12.
Okay. Because I think you're right. Like, it's always the white person always like gets to default to English, and everyone has to conform to them, and that's not what happens in this movie. And it's different, and because it's a language, I have to think like they're people. Again, I don't have a lot of knowledge of this, and I really apologize if I'm stepping on anybody's toes, but I would imagine there are not a lot of Native Cheyenne speakers left. And that there's had to have been at least like some concerted effort to keep the language alive. Like, how amazing to see it on film.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I've also heard you mention like that the characters themselves are more complicated, right? They're not just they're not just the the wise, peaceful bodhisattvas. They get down when they need to. Like when things get real, they're ready to fight, and they have, like, Yellowhawk has committed his own sort of war atrocities along the way. And the two characters, like, or Blocker and Yellowhawk, I think at some point do have a more overt conversation about, hey, look, I've killed your friends, you've killed my friends. So I guess life happens. It wasn't personal, sorry. But yeah, they're not just, oh look, I'm a great guy, and the Comanche's bad and Cheyenne good. It was just everyone was people, right? People are people everywhere you go, and they try to depict that in a really honest way. Like, no matter what group you're sort of referring to, half of them are going to be jerks, half of them are going to be decent, and a few of them will be extraordinary. And that's true of Cheyenne. That's true of, I guess, 1892 soldiers. It's true of just any group, anywhere you go. And like they tried really hard, I think, to be truthful in that way.
Right. And I think too, like, just having the Comanche there at all, not just having, like, again, good Indian, bad Indian. That's not what this movie was. It's strongly implied that, Yellowhawk is a war criminal in his own right, just as everybody else. But, one of the, historically problematic portrayals, it was like an Indian is an Indian is an Indian. And it's like, no, like, the Comanche look different. They dress different. They are different than these Cheyenne Indians. Like, that, just showing that there's, like, honestly different kind of Indians is somewhat progressive in this movie.
Right.
So, like,
they are nations unto themselves. Like, each group is an entire nation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, the movie I watched about it, like, they were like, everybody acts like every kind of Indian is a Plains Indian.
Yeah, why are there no adobe? And I want to see people in adobe huts. I want to see some earthen mounds. I'm tired of teepees.
I guess on that note, like, we can move to the social impact score, but I do want to say one thing. This is we didn't talk too much about Rosamund Pike's character, but I did love the, like, she actually, unfortunately, grows increasingly violent in this movie as well. But there's a moment where she pulls a shotgun on a guy and he gives the like, haha, I don't really believe you're going to use that. And then she totally shoots him. And I was like, yes. And it was
moment.
like, never dare anyone to fire a gun at you. Like,
I know,
if they weren't
I
going
know.
to before, you daring them is definitely going to make them pull that trigger. Like,
Absolutely. And especially not when you're like holding a gun on a cute guy that I like. and then you say that to me? No. You're
Yeah.
going down, bruh. You're going down.
So ultimately, the movie had a lot to say about, sort of war crimes and atrocities, and how they weigh on you. So that was another thing that was really interesting about the movie. So Rory Cochrane has this big speech to one of the newer West Point recruits in their party, and he says, every time, he's like, you do get used to killing people.
Because do you ever get used to killing civilians, right?
Yeah. And he's like, no, you just get used to it. What you don't get used to is losing men.
Right.
And he gives you that line, and it's so utterly not true.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was so interesting the way they presented that in the movie. Like, he's telling the other dude, no, you'll be fine with it. And it's like, no, the weight of all those people that he's killed.
Right. Like, I can see how fine you are, I can see how well you're doing with a lifetime of this under your belt.
Yeah. And I thought the sort of, the denial that you need to tell yourself to keep going, I thought was a really, like, everybody has their way of reconciling to themselves until they can't, the things that they've done.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what a lot of soldiers have to do, right, is to get along day to day taking lives, is you have to dehumanize the person on the other end of that gun. Or a weapon or whatever. You have to convince yourself, you have to, know, in quotes, in your heart that this person is subhuman and needs to be destroyed, because otherwise, how could you do it? How could you do it day in and day out? Which makes, the journey that Blocker goes on even more, it casts it in even sharper relief. Like, you see exactly how far he has to go to come around on Yellowhawk. It's tough for him, but it's the journey is a beautiful one to behold.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's where my sort of, I think the movie presents the issue as, he has to learn that I was just following orders isn't okay. Like, that's not an excuse to do what needs to be done. And I think that the military as an organization absolutely presents it that way. You follow orders without question. And that's my problem with the military.
Well, there is, as the resident military apologist, there is the asterisk there is, so long as it's not against international war law, like
right.
Laws of war. It's like, then you can say, no, sir, that's against international, regulations of war. But he didn't do that.
No, he didn't. And I just sort of, generally, it's hard to say. You're trained and structured to follow orders. And I just have a really hard time. That's not moral cover for me. It just isn't. And that's sort of where I guess, that's where my anti-militarism comes in.
Sure. And either way, at the end of the day, it's Blocker has to live with himself, right?
He
Whether
does.
Or not he feels like his actions were justified or not, he has to lay down at night and sleep soundly or not.
Yep. Yeah. And the implication being, regardless of whether or not you're following orders, it's hard to do that. it's hard to take lies and feel okay about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I love this movie so much.
I liked it more than I thought I would. It was traumatizing on the violence front for me, but I did like it.
Again. Sorry about that. But yeah, I'm so glad that you found it like rewarding in some regards. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you lay on it for a social impact score?
I'm gonna on a social impact score of 1 to 10, 1 being it changes nothing, 10 being the world we once knew is gone forever. I'm gonna be pretty modest with this one, despite how much I liked it. I'm gonna give it a 3. I don't think it'll change the world, but it's just such a beautiful story about people from different backgrounds with bad blood kind of reconciling, and that's, I don't know, that could help somebody who watches it maybe come to grips with something. So I say 3. You?
Okay. So I'm actually surprisingly going to go a little higher. I'm closer to giving it a 4 or a 5 because of your excellent film history lesson on Westerns. I think that this movie pushed the ball forward on how American Indians are portrayed in Westerns and on film. And I think that it will, hopefully, I think it will become a new benchmark and make, there's always, flashbacks to people in whatever blackface or, the progress isn't perfectly linear, but I think this really sets a line in the sand of saying like, okay, some things are just unacceptable now, and this movie was made, and you're gonna have to do better. So
you gotta match this.
We can't go backward from this point. So I think it does set a new benchmark, and for that, I will give it a higher score. So recommendations.
I'd like to recommend a Western that came out several years ago, also starring Christian Bale and Ben Foster, called 3:10 to Yuma. It's not quite as thoughtful, but Christian Bale's performance is pretty great, and the movie is it's a decent, fun Western overall. So if you like that kind of thing,
yes, and also Alan Tudyk is in it, the hero of Rogue One.
That's right.
I'm gonna recommend. So, in my homework for this podcast was a movie called Real Injun, a documentary. I streamed the whole thing for free on YouTube. I'll put it in the show notes. And it's made by an American Indian director, documentarian about the portrayal of Indians in Westerns over the years, and brings in a lot of different, historical landmarks along the way. I learned a lot from watching it, so please check that out. And if you're not already Stacy and you don't already know all this stuff yourself from just having watched all the Westerns,
I imagine it doesn't take as long as watching all of those old movies. Yes, it's a
bit shorter than checking out John Ford's entire oeuvre, but
awesome.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please take a second to leave a review on iTunes and recommend it to your friends. Check out our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, for links to things we've discussed. And you can visit our brand new store. If you want to talk to us, leave a comment on our Facebook page or on Twitter with our tag @MoviesMatterPod, and then check Twitter to find out what movie we're overanalyzing next. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.